Hello everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. In this example, in today's MTPredictor video, I'd like to look at an example on the DAX that's just unfolded of how to put all our MTPredictor analysis together. In other words, look at the multi-time frames. But before we get to the charts, we have to look at our risk disclaimer and remind you that all examples in these videos should be considered as hypothetical. No trades are actually taken, they're just shown for illustration and trading purposes only. Remind you there's a risk of loss in trading and investing, or put another way, all professional traders know and understand, but more importantly accept, that losses can and will and do unfold. Right, let's have a look at the chart. The example I want to look at today is this VS setup here that's just unfolded on a 3-minute chart of the DAX. Just to quickly remind you what a VS setup is, it's basically where the market goes beyond a prior important psychological level. In other words, on this bar here, we went below the previous low here. Can you see that? It went below that low on high volume. The market then failed to follow through. In other words, it reversed and started to come back up. But it didn't do this at any old place. It did this at our DP level from the prior low. In other words, it means that the volume in this bar here, this high volume here that I'm highlighting, wasn't actually selling, it was actually professionals coming in and buying. So in other words, it's a classic fake out. If I take that off, we then place the analysis on our blue buy bar here. So I right mouse click here, do analysis. Remember, we use correct position sizing to vary the number of lots, contracts or shares. In this case, it'll be one contract on the full DAX contract here. The market went up and has now just reached our first target, where a profit of approximately 5 times the initial risk was available. So a nice profit where the initial risk was controlled. So if this has been a losing trade, this would be what we call a 1R loss or 1 risk unit loss. As the market's got up to this level here, this actually turned out to be a 5R profit. So the question being is, do we just simply take all our MTPredictor trade setups that are in the direction of the large tree trend as indicated by our MTP trend indicator here? In other words, black for in the process of reversing or flat, blue for up and red for down, or do we look to other things? Well, ideally we look to other things, and more importantly, if I clear everything off, we look to the higher time frame chart. So for this, I'll go out to the 15-minute. Oh, there's my analysis on from earlier, so I'll just take that off and just show you what I did here. So the market has made a decline down into today's level. If I put the session breaks on, you can see that it came down into this level here. If I right mouse click here, do Elliott wave intermediate, can you see how the low that's just come in was right at the typical wave 5 WPT? In other words, this was a 5-wave sequence, a bit choppy because we normally like to see wave 3 the strongest and longest in a completed 5-wave sequence, but it can't be the shortest, and that's the case here. So not an ideal 5-wave count, but nevertheless there was a reason that the market was coming to a potential end or a low at this particular point here. Also, if I go out to the higher time frame, the 1 hourly chart, and I zoom out a bit, can you see how this is the last swing into this high? In other words, the market went up here, chopped sideways a bit. In fact, it actually popped up a little bit higher, not quite up to our DP resistance area, but it popped up a little bit higher here before coming down. But the point being is that just before this sideways action, this looked like it was the last swing up into this high. So we right mouse click on this pivot and we do a DP support zone from here. Remember, this would have been on the chart in advance, so this would have been on the chart here days in advance. But the relevance for today is, can you see how today the market went down and went into this hourly support zone? If we step back through the time frames, we come back to 15-minute. Can you see here how our typical wave 5 WPT fell right in that larger degree hourly support zone? So 2 different reasons why there was potential support. So when we come back to the 3-minute chart, can you see how this VS buy setup here was actually in the support zone and as such was a good one to take. Incidentally, we actually had a DP buy a bit earlier in the day, and if I right mouse click over that blue buy bar there, do the analysis, you can see that was actually a nice trade there as well. But for me, this VS setup was better because to catch the end of a trend, it's better to come in with the professional traders and piggyback on the back of those. So for trend termination trade setups, the VS setup is actually a better setup than our DP one. But obviously that's available if you're a more aggressive trader. So that's how we put things together, but you see how it wasn't just a VS setup on our correctly coloured MTP trend, i.e. black, to show it's in the process of reversing. There were other things coming in here at the same time. In particular, our DP support and also confirmation on the 15-minute chart that we're potentially at a trend termination pattern as well. And that's what we like to see with our MTPredictor trade setups, and indeed you should look for in any kind of analysis you're doing. You should look for other reasons why the market is doing what you anticipate. In other words, looking for other confirmation indicators or confirming indicators to come in and tell you the same thing. So I wanted to do this video today just to show you how best to use our MTPredictor trade setups, in that we're not a black box system where we look to take trades all the time. The reason for that is, as I outlined in our training webinars, is that the markets go through phases, and probably 50% of the time or slightly more they're basically random, so you can't be doing any meaningful analysis at all. But in the clear 50%, then it's best to look when everything's coming together on multiple time frames, and this I thought was a very good example to show you the VS setup coming in at 60-minute DP support and the typical wave 5 WPT on the 15-minute. Again, the VS setup is one of my favorite trade setups because it basically comes in on the back of the professional money, particularly like this, where it went down below an important psychological level on high volume, then snapped back up again and reversed, but it reversed right at our DP support zone. This indicates that the volume coming in, or the high volume coming in on this wide range bar, was not selling, which most amateurs would think is actually professionals coming in and buying, and normally when the professionals do that, they tend to move the market sharply in the opposite direction. In other words, catching all the amateurs on the wrong side of the trade. But MTPredictor, the VS setup and MTPredictor, is designed to catch this this change in sentiment and to catch this move. And as you can see, a very nice example that's just unfolded on a 3-minute chart of the DAX.